Based on concerns raised by council members and the public over the summer, the Boise Police Department has completed the following initiatives. So we've put in place an executive order for a duty to intervene, making it part of our policy functionally. This policy says in part that officers must intervene to prevent use of force that is clearly unreasonable under the circumstances. This was the past expectation and practice prior to this order, but it was not an official policy. And by enshrining it into policy, it internally reinforces this expectation as well as makes it clear to the public and a clear statement to the public about what they can expect from their police department. We've been working under an updated draft policy for public order policing, or what more commonly referred to as crowd management. This includes a new planning process and the assignment of liaison officers to all groups that may be involved in any form of protest activity. We've also enhanced our crisis intervention training. So all officers who have not already received the 40 hours of crisis intervention training, which is the national standard for specialized crisis intervention teams, and is going to be the baseline for every officer in the city of Boise. We reinforce the message with officers that they are to be apolitical and avoid any action that could violate the city's policy on political speech. So, for example, the department stance that the thin blue line flag or symbol not be displayed on department issued items, vehicles, or outside officers is similar to other prohibitions on political activities on city property. In regards to no-knock warrants, direction was given that officers may not request or serve a no-knock warrant. The only exception is under extreme circumstances that would require judicial approval as well as approval from the chief of police prior to any service. The Boise Police Department's also updated our implicit bias training, and officers will go through this updated training in December. This training discusses new content, including procedural justice and its corresponding elements. The training also includes recorded interviews from community members. These videos allow for, especially under these times, as close to in-person representation and perspective from individuals who have personal experience with bias, and provide recommendations to our officers from our community members on ways to counteract it. This training was developed using a variety of sources, including research from Dr. Bryant Marks of Morehouse University with the National Training Institute on Race and Equity, and Dr. Kimberly Kahn, the Associate Professor of Social Psychology at Portland State University and lead of the Gender, Race, and Sexual Prejudice Lab. It also reinforces journals and policy research organizations, including Criminology, the Urban Institute, and the Center for Court Innovation. Following initiatives are in the final stages, and again, I really look forward to your input on them. We're working on a plan to add an additional 2-member behavioral health response team. We're still working through the logistics of creating the staffing for those positions and those openings and posting for them. But we're in the late stages of that, and we would seek guidance from council on deployment strategies or any other concerns that they may have around that team. We're revising our entire use of force policy. That includes addressing the lateral vascular neck restraint, which is currently suspended. Best practice would be to classify it as a deadly force in the new policy. And we have a draft policy, which is on review. As part of a complete review of the use of force policy, we're looking to add clarity, definitions, and to make sure that it is more comprehensive in addition to being in line with best practices. The Boise Police Department is reviewing its own pursuit policy and working with other agencies with a goal of entering into a county-wide agreement on pursuit management. The Boise Police Department is in favor of a strict pursuit policy, and we would like to be in alignment with other local agencies whose pursuits may enter into our city limits. A working group is reviewing best practices for a revised discipline process and policy. The proposed policy would include a discipline guide to ensure a more standardized approach to discipline and a revised process geared towards encouraging transparency and accountability. I know that members of council have expressed the desire for greater transparency through data, and the Boise Police Department's been working to develop dashboards. We understand we're still missing a lot of data that we've been asked to provide, and we're working to build the infrastructure and mechanisms to accurately capture that information. But these 2 dashboards have been created for calls for service and response times. We're working on creating a way to capture resident stop data and use of force data to allow public-facing dashboards. In the future, this data will include demographic information. I know that's been very important to council as well. Some of the questions we're planning to ask residents in the survey, the aforementioned survey, are How would you rate the user friendliness of the first two dashboards? What could we do to increase user friendliness? Are there additional dashboards you'd like to see the Boise Police Department develop? And are there additional data points you'd like to see? We also have a number of projects that are still in progress, and I look forward to your thoughts on prioritization. Some of the projects would include a complete reorganization and rewrite of policy, revision of 3 critical policies, force discipline and pursuit, as I've already mentioned, are in progress, but there are multiple additional areas of concern where existing policy doesn't reflect national best practice and therefore may subject the city to liability. There are also gaps in the current policy manual where essential topics are frankly completely missing. Given Boise's location on an interstate highway and information from previous investigations, we see a need to build out an overall strategy for combating human trafficking and to allocate resources and personnel to this initiative. There's also a need to create a service coordination team, which I spoke to before, which will assist in directing people with addiction to community providers rather than further police contacts. We're also looking at our goals around recruiting, staffing, and leadership development with a focus on recruiting that includes equitable access to employment for all people.